surprise you. The most dangerous fat in your body is not the fat you can pinch. It's not the fat under your skin. It's the fat you can't see. It's called visceral fat. This fat wraps itself around your liver, your pancreas, your intestines, and even your heart. And I want you to understand something very clearly. Visceral fat is not passive storage. It is biologically active. It releases inflammatory chemicals. It disrupts hormones. It drives insulin resistance, diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver, and even dementia. Now, here's the good news. Visceral fat has one major weakness. It cannot survive in a low insulin environment. And today, I want to explain the #1 fasting hack that directly targets visceral fat. Not with supplements, not with extreme dieting, but by working with your biology instead of against it. Most people believe body fat is just extra weight, something cosmetic, something that makes clothes tighter or mirrors uncomfortable. But there is a type of fat inside your body that is not waiting quietly. It is watching. It is signaling. It is actively damaging you every single day. This fat is called visceral fat, and it does not care how much you exercise or how little you eat. If one hormone stays high, that hormone is insulin. And here is the truth. Most people never hear visceral fat is not caused by overeating calories. It is caused by chronically elevated insulin. This is not opinion. This is human physiology. Visceral fat is stored deep inside the abdomen, wrapped tightly around the liver, pancreas, kidneys, intestines, and even pressing against the heart. Unlike subcutaneous fat under the skin, visceral fat behaves like an endocrine organ. It releases inflammatory cytokines, such as interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, chemicals known to damage blood vessels, disrupt insulin signaling, and accelerate plaque formation in arteries. Studies show people with excess visceral fat have dramatically higher risks of heart attack, stroke, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, and even Alzheimer's disease. This fat is not passive. It is aggressive. What feeds this fat is not fat itself. It is insulin. Insulin is a storage hormone. Its job is to move glucose out of the bloodstream and into cells. But insulin has a second job that is rarely discussed. It shuts down fat burning completely. When insulin is elevated, your body is locked in storage mode. Fat cannot be released. Fat cannot be burned. And visceral fat, which is highly insulin sensitive, thrives in this environment. Modern life keeps insulin elevated from morning to night. Breakfast spikes insulin. Snacks spike insulin. Lunch spikes insulin. Energy drinks spike insulin. Late dinners spike insulin. Desserts spike insulin. And when insulin stays high all day, the body never enters fat-burning mode. The liver begins converting excess glucose into fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis. That fat is preferentially stored viscerally because visceral fat responds faster to insulin signals than subcutaneous fat. This is why people can look thin, but still have dangerous belly fat inside. This is why waist circumference predicts heart disease better than body weight. Research has shown that individuals with insulin resistance can have insulin levels 2 to 5 times higher than normal, while still maintaining normal blood sugar levels. This means the damage is happening silently, long before diabetes is diagnosed. By the time fasting glucose rises, visceral fat has often been accumulating for years, inflaming organs, stiffening arteries, and poisoning metabolism from the inside out. Here is the shocking part. Exercise alone does not fix this. You cannot outrun insulin. Studies consistently show that while exercise improves insulin sensitivity, it does not significantly reduce visceral fat if insulin remains chronically elevated due to frequent eating. The body cannot burn fat while insulin is high, no matter how many calories are burned. This is why people exercise daily, eat low fat, count calories, and still watch their belly expand year after year. Visceral fat is especially dangerous because it drains directly into the portal vein, sending fatty acids and inflammatory signals straight to the liver. This overwhelms the liver, leading to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, now the most common liver disorder in the world. Fatty liver worsens insulin resistance, which raises insulin even further, creating a vicious cycle. High insulin creates visceral fat. Visceral fat creates insulin resistance. Insulin resistance creates more insulin, and the cycle tightens. Autopsy studies reveal that people who die of heart disease often have large deposits of visceral fat even if they were not obese by BMI standards. Imaging studies using CT and MRI scans show that visceral fat is the strongest predictor of cardiovascular events, stronger than cholesterol levels alone. This fat destabilizes plaques, increases clotting risk, and accelerates arterial aging. It is not just about appearance, it is about survival. Visceral fat also interferes with hormones beyond insulin. It increases cortisol sensitivity, making stress more damaging. It converts androgens into estrogen, disrupting hormonal balance in both men and women. It suppresses adiponectin, a protective hormone that improves insulin sensitivity and reduces inflammation. As visceral fat grows, protective hormones fall and destructive signals rise. And here is where hope enters the picture. Visceral fat has one critical weakness. It cannot survive without insulin. The moment insulin drops, visceral fat loses its protection. It becomes metabolically exposed. The body identifies it as toxic fuel and begins breaking it down first. This is why reductions in insulin lead to rapid decreases in waist size, even before weight changes on the scale. Clinical studies on fasting and insulin reduction show dramatic drops in visceral fat independent of calorie intake. When insulin falls, hormone-sensitive lipase activates, releasing stored fat. Glucagon rises, signaling the liver to burn fat. Growth hormone increases, preserving muscle while targeting fat. Inflammatory markers decline. This is not starvation. This is metabolic correction. The body was never designed to eat constantly. Historically, insulin rose when food was available and fell for long stretches when it was not. During those low insulin periods, visceral fat was burned as a survival fuel. Today, constant eating keeps insulin artificially elevated, protecting visceral fat and turning it into a long-term metabolic liability. This is why diets that focus only on calories fail. They ignore hormones. They ignore insulin. They ignore the biological switch that determines whether fat is stored or burned until insulin is addressed. Visceral fat remains untouched no matter how disciplined someone appears. The most dangerous fat in the body is not caused by weakness, laziness, or lack of willpower. It is caused by a hormonal environment that traps fat inside vital organs. And the moment that environment changes, visceral fat begins to disappear. Lower insulin is not a trend. It is not a hack. It is the physiological requirement for fat loss and metabolic health. And once insulin falls, visceral fat does not stand a chance. There is a reason why the human body heals at night, why growth hormone peaks in darkness, and why every major repair system turns on when food is absent. This is not accidental. This is design. And yet, modern life has quietly erased the most powerful metabolic advantage humans ever had, the overnight fast. What most people don't realize is that visceral fat does not disappear through effort or motivation. It disappears through timing. And the single most effective timing strategy is consistent early time-restricted fasting. When you eat late into the night, your body is forced into storage mode at the exact time it is meant to repair. Insulin remains elevated. Fat burning shuts down. Autophagy, the cellular cleanup process linked to longevity, is suppressed. Growth hormone collapses and visceral fat remains protected, wrapped around your organs like armor. This is why late-night eating is associated with higher rates of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, independent of calorie intake. Large population studies show that people who eat most of their calories late in the evening have significantly higher fasting insulin levels the next morning. This means insulin never truly drops. And if insulin never drops, visceral fat never burns. Your body is stuck in a metabolic traffic jam, storing energy when it should be clearing damage. Time-restricted eating changes this equation completely. By limiting food intake to a defined window earlier in the day, insulin is allowed to fall naturally for extended periods. And when insulin falls, the body switches fuel sources. Glucose use declines. Fat burning turns on. And visceral fat, which is highly insulin sensitive, becomes the first target. Research using MRI and CT imaging shows that visceral fat responds faster to fasting than subcutaneous fat. This is critical. The fat most closely linked to heart attacks and diabetes is also the fat most vulnerable to insulin withdrawal. In studies where participants followed a 14 to 16-hour daily fasting window, visceral fat decreased significantly even when total calorie intake remained unchanged. This proves the driver is not restriction. It is hormonal access. The liver plays a central role here. During prolonged overnight fasting, liver glycogen becomes depleted. Once this happens, the liver is forced to pull energy from fat stores. Visceral fat drains directly into the portal circulation, making it the most accessible fuel source. This is why waistlines shrink before body weight changes. The body is clearing internal fat first, not cosmetic fat, but timing matters more than duration. Eating earlier in the day aligns fasting with circadian biology. Insulin sensitivity is highest in the morning and lowest at night. Eating late requires more insulin for the same food. This leads to higher insulin exposure, more fat storage, and less fat burning. Studies comparing early versus late time-restricted eating show dramatically better reductions in insulin, inflammation, and visceral fat when food intake ends earlier in the evening. One landmark trial demonstrated that people who stopped eating by early evening experienced improved insulin sensitivity, lower blood pressure, and reduced oxidative stress within weeks without weight loss. This tells us something profound. Metabolic health improves before the scale moves. The body prioritizes internal repair first. At night, when food is absent, growth hormone surges. Growth hormone is not a muscle-building hormone alone. It is a fat-mobilizing hormone. It protects lean tissue while directing the body to burn fat, particularly visceral fat. Late-night eating suppresses this surge. Early fasting restores it. This is one reason why consistent early fasting preserves muscle while shrinking the waist. Inflammation also drops. Visceral fat produces inflammatory cytokines that damage blood vessels and interfere with insulin signaling. Fasting reduces these signals. C-reactive protein, interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha all decline with time-restricted eating. This reduces arterial inflammation and stabilizes plaques, lowering heart attack risk. The pancreas benefits as well. Constant eating forces the pancreas to secrete insulin repeatedly, leading to beta cell exhaustion. Fasting gives the pancreas rest. Insulin production becomes more efficient. Blood sugar control improves. Over time, insulin resistance reverses. And as insulin resistance reverses, visceral fat losses. Its lifeline. This is why consistency is more powerful than intensity. A daily 14 to 16-hour fast done 5 or 6 days a week produces more visceral fat loss than occasional extreme fasts. The body adapts to rhythm. Predictable fasting windows retrain insulin dynamics. Chaos keeps insulin elevated. Rhythm brings it down. People often ask why they feel mentally clearer and calmer during fasting. The answer lies in reduced insulin and increased ketone production. Ketones are a clean fuel for the brain. They reduce oxidative stress and improve mitochondrial efficiency. This is why fasting has been linked to reduced risk of neurodegenerative disease. Visceral fat reduction is not just about the waist. It is about protecting the brain. And here is the most overlooked benefit. Fasting restores metabolic flexibility. A healthy body can switch between glucose and fat easily. Visceral fat accumulation is a sign of metabolic rigidity. The body is stuck in sugar. Burning mode. Time-restricted fasting restores the ability to burn fat on demand. This is the metabolic state humans evolved in. None of this requires special foods, supplements, or extreme discipline. It requires one decision repeated consistently to stop eating early enough for insulin to fall and stay low long enough for fat burning to occur. The body does the rest. Visceral fat thrives in constant abundance. It cannot survive in structured absence. The moment insulin is allowed to drop night after night, visceral fat becomes expendable. It is broken down, exported, and burned quietly, efficiently, naturally. This is not starvation. This is restoration. It is a return to the biological rhythm that protected humans for thousands of years. And when that rhythm is restored, visceral fat has nowhere to hide.